All right, Don, we're doing 17.4 progressivism under Taft. Right? So we're going to talk about the Taft presidency, right? That he was Roosevelt's hand-picked successor. And learn about what he did and how he kind of is going to end up causing this gigantic split in the Republican Party. And it's really important to see how he balances the progressive interests and the interests of kind of more conservative Americans. Right? Here's Taft. He's a big guy. He's the fattest president we ever had. He was about 6 feet tall, weighed 350 pounds. They joke, there's all these stories about him like herding horses by riding them and kind of needing a new bathtub to get installed into the White House because he was so big. He was a quiet guy. He wasn't ready. He's like very much personality-wise different than Roosevelt. He's kind of shy. He doesn't really enjoy the limelight. Where Roosevelt was this larger-than-life, kind of big-time personality, loud, aggressive. Taft really wasn't any of those things. So they're very different kind of personas these two men had, and you can see that in the way Taft kind of felt about being president. He didn't really like it. He never really felt that he was filling the shoes that Roosevelt had left him very well. That kind of underlies his whole presidency. He's kind of very cautious, very slow-moving, kind of very conservative, when Roosevelt was this big, ambitious guy. He does get some credit. He busted over 90 trusts during his short 4-year term. That's about double what Roosevelt busted in his 8 years, right? So there are some progressive advances under Taft, but it never really feels like he's really all on board with the progressive movement, right? The Payne-Alder tariff and this fight over this kind of really kind of hurts him with progressives, right? And progressives want a lower tariff. Tariffs, again, are taxes on things imported into the country, right? Progressives want lower tariffs, right? Tariffs are the way the government funds itself mostly during this time period. You get a lot of money, and it protects businesses in the country, right? Higher tariffs make imported goods more expensive, which benefits businesses. If you own a factory and you are in the United States and there's a high tariff on that product, your business is kind of protected from foreign competition. On the other hand, though, progressives are opposed to this because these big trusts and monopolies are jacking up the prices on these things, and the foreign international competition isn't really making a difference, right? So if you lower the tariffs, progressives want them lowered because it's going to lower the price of the goods, right? It's going to benefit the poor, the middle class, right? The people that are buying the goods, that are kind of paying a lot of money for them, are going to benefit from having lower tariffs, right? And when the Payne-Alder tariff gets passed, which really kind of raises some, lowers some a little bit, doesn't really kind of have the sweeping change that progressives want, a lot of them turn against Taft. At the same time, he doesn't really live up to Roosevelt's legacy on conservation. He gives up a lot of land to kind of Western, especially in the West, to Western entrepreneurs that want to use it for mining and logging. He sets his Interior Secretary as Bollinger, and he is set up as a kind of a businessman that doesn't really care about conservation, and he gets attacked by progressives for that as well. So his 4-year term isn't quite going as well as he would kind of wanted it to go, and he's turning the Republican Party kind of against itself. Okay, so the Alder tariff, the fight over conservation land has kind of split the party, right? Roosevelt had famously promised against his first election, he said he would count McKinley's term as his first term, and he wouldn't run for re-election in 1908. And that's when Taft wins. He immediately regretted that decision. And in 1912, especially after Taft's kind of, he viewed it as failure, his timidity, right, and being the only job Teddy Roosevelt ever really wanted to have, Teddy Roosevelt decides to run and represent this progressive Republican Party, right? So Taft kind of comes to represent the conservative Republicans, the business Republicans. Teddy Roosevelt, again, represents the progressive Republicans, and they become known as the Bull Moose Party. This happened, Teddy Roosevelt actually got shot during giving a speech, survives, and kind of, when they were asking him, he said, "I'm strong as a bull moose," and that kind of stuck as as the name for his party, right? You can see this is a button, right? A bull moose is a large male moose, right? And again, Teddy still was full of that energy and life that he kind of always been, that bigger than life personality. That kind of really drives him, right? And he wants more, right? He kind of unleashed from the conservative wing of the Republican Party. He goes for more and more progressive reform, and he's kind of even farther away from where it was than when he was president. The initiatives, referendums, women's suffrage, all of these things are things that Teddy Roosevelt really endorses in 1912. The Democrats, sensing a good opportunity here, being that their Republican Party has split in half, is nominates Woodrow Wilson, again, another progressive, but a Democratic progressive, so they had some different views. And Woodrow Wilson, he's governor of New Jersey, had been president of Princeton, and he's also really racist, but we'll talk about that later. He gets the Democratic nomination. Okay? So Taft and Roosevelt are kind of destroying each other the entire time. Taft kind of is more lenient on big business, right? Especially after the tariff thing, right? People see him as being kind of soft in big business, even though he did bust 90 trusts, so it's kind of depends on what the stats you look at. Roosevelt, right, wants to give lots of government action to support the people, support the business, right? But he's not opposed to big business per se, right? He doesn't think that big business is inherently wrong. He thinks that you should regulate big business and make sure that it's fair. Okay? Wilson says that big business, no matter what, is wrong. It doesn't matter how you regulate it. You have to bust up all the big business. He's a big fan of the small business. He wants free market capitalism. He wants kind of the competition of these smaller companies and not these big, gigantic, titan companies that kind of dominate the country at the time. And our good friend Eugene V. Debs is also running for president here as a socialist, which again is radical change, right? Totally upending the system. And he does a good job. He does pretty well as a kind of fourth party kind of socialist, right? Wilson is obviously benefiting from this split in the Republican Party. And it's going to see that he's going to end up winning only 42% of the popular vote, but a true landslide in the Electoral College vote, right? Debs does about 7%, almost 1 million votes, which is like really as good as any socialist candidate's ever really done before. Taft wins a few states, Roosevelt wins a few states, but because their vote is split, it hands the election to the Democrats and Wilson. Okay, the next election, 17.5, we're going to talk about Wilson's plan and progressive policies. If you have any questions, make sure you ask your